In March of 2013, 30-year-old Joanna Dennehy went on a crime spree that rocked the people of England and left several men either dead or injured, making her one of the most infamous female serial killers in British history. When she was finally apprehended for the Peterborough ditch murders, law enforcement learned that Dennehy was driven by a sadistic lust, which was noted by the judge who later sentenced her for her crimes. In fact, Dennehy was determined to be so cruel, calculating, and selfish, killing seemingly without motive. She was given a sentence that British courts reserve for only the most vicious and dangerous offenders, making it unlikely that she'll ever be able to brutally attack another unsuspecting man. Since beginning her sentence, Dennehy has also reportedly begun work on a fictional series depicting crimes similar to her own, which she has hopes in seeing made into a Hollywood film. In the years before she committed the crimes that made her one of Britain's most notorious women, Joanna Dennehy displayed signs that she was an extremely troubled young woman. From the time she was a teenager, Dennehy had been a heavy drinker and drug user, and she had grisly scars all over her body caused by cuts she had inflicted on herself. She also worked as a sex worker or stole money to get drugs and alcohol, and she was eventually arrested for theft in February of 2012. Following that arrest, 29-year-old Dennehy was admitted to a hospital for psychiatric treatment, and she was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder as well as antisocial disorder. Over the course of 10 days during March of 2013, Joanna Dennehy viciously stabbed 3 men to death. Let's listen to the story. Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of Always Talking Crime. I am so glad you're here. You don't even know. I was so excited all day to get home from my work, from my job, and record this episode. I'm actually kind of waiting to the last minute this time. Usually, like I've explained before, I typically record on Thursdays because it's my day off during the week. I work Fridays and Saturdays, and then, of course, I'm off Sundays because our business is closed, and that's the day that the new episode drops. But I was so busy on Thursday doing errands, doing other things. I've got this other business that I'm getting off the ground. I finished editing all of my notes for this episode, but I never really had enough time to fully give all of my attention to recording. So it is Saturday evening, the night before the new episode drops, but I really, really hope that you guys love it. Well, not love it, because, I mean, there's nothing to love about the things that Joanna Dennehy did in 2013, but, for all of you true crime lovers, I hope you enjoy it. I hope, that it fills your true crime cup this morning or this evening or whenever you're listening to it. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to talk about a man named Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee owned a business called Quicklet, which gave homes to homeless and vulnerable people. Most of his properties were in the Orton Goldhay area in Peterborough, England. It was mostly former council housing, which he renovated himself with his experience as a builder. Now, typically, people who were looking to the council for help with accommodations were referred to Kevin's business. Kevin was a family man. He loved watching Formula One racing. He even named his son Dino after a Ferrari race car. As Dino grew up, Kevin took him karting on most weekends. And Dino was very good at it. In fact, he made it all the way to the British Karting Championship. Kevin was a positive and kind person. He wanted to give people a chance in life. He liked helping his tenants out. Sometimes he wouldn't insist on a deposit and was always available to do repairs and maintenance to his properties. When a woman with a prison record came to Kevin looking for a place to stay, he found her a spot in a shared apartment with a common kitchen and bathroom. This woman was Joanna Dennehy. Dennehy was released from prison after serving 14 weeks for theft. But the story she told Kevin was that she'd been in prison for 8 years. She said that she was sent to prison because she had killed her father after he had raped her. She also confided to him that she had killed 2 other people in a house fire and ran 2 other people over with a car, but she was never suspected for those other murders. Kevin was able to look past Dennehy's sordid past. For some reason, he was a good person, I guess. He wanted to help her. In fact, before long, he developed romantic feelings for her. He became quite infatuated with her, in fact. He let Dennehy stay rent-free in his bedsits and even bought her gifts. In return, Dennehy went around to Kevin's other tenants and threatened them if they had not paid rent. She was somewhat of a debt collector for Kevin, I guess you would say, and Kevin was usually mild-mannered and kind to all of his tenants. Once she was settled, intimidating Kevin's tenants in exchange for living rent-free, she was pretty much as happy as she would ever be. She was like right there in her element. She loved using her dangerous magnetism to invoke fear into other people. And Kevin once mentioned that she reminded him of Uma Thurman in the movie Kill Bill. Kevin's wife began to notice that his behavior had changed, and she started to feel uneasy about his friendship with Dennehy. On March 20th of 2013, he confessed to her that he was in fact having an affair with Dennehy. Christina was devastated, but the couple decided to try and work things out. When Kevin didn't come home that night, despite their problems, Christina was convinced that he was in trouble. Kevin had told her days before that Dennehy had said she wanted to kill again. So, of course, alarm bells were ringing for his wife, Christina. Something wasn't right, and she was certain Joanna Dennehy had something to do with Kevin's absence. Joanna Christina Dennehy was born in St. Albans, Hertfordshire in 1982. She actually had quite an ordinary childhood. Her mother, Kathleen, worked in a supermarket, and her father, Kevin, worked as a security officer. She had a younger sister named Maria, and they had a happy and wholesome upbringing. Dennehy's mom describes her as a loving and sensitive child with good reports and a very polite manner. She played netball for the school, and she loved music. Dennehy had high aspirations, and she wanted to become a lawyer, a career choice that would have made her parents very, very proud. But once Dennehy hit her teens, that is when the trouble started. She was out of control. She was burning books, ditching school. She was drinking and doing drugs. When she was 14 years old, she met a 20-year-old man named John Traynor while he was in a park walking his dog. Dennehy approached him since she had a thing for dogs, and it just kind of went from there. The two were taken with each other immediately, and as creepy as fuck as it is, they fucking started dating, despite the 6-year age gap between them. She was 14. He was 20. Yeah, 6 years age difference later on down the road isn't a big deal, but, I'm sure you all agree with me that, and it's kind of redundant to even say, but I'm going to say it because I'm so fucking creeped out. Anyways, her parents agreed with me, or maybe I agree with them, because they pleaded with her at the time to end her relationship with John and finish school. But Dennehy wouldn't have any of it. At the age of 15, she dropped out of school and left her family home. Neither Dennehy's nor John Trainor's parents would let them live with them, as everyone was opposed to their relationship. Like, at least somebody had some good sense, Dennehy's parents kept their hopes up that the relationship would not last and that their daughter would come back home. But she never did. In 1997, Dennehy and John lived rough for an entire year. Their home was a tent. Sometimes they would sleep at bus stations. John knew she could handle herself because she could literally bring a grown man to tears with only the use of her sharp tongue. John was never a drinker, but he did smoke weed. By his own admission, he was no angel, but he had things under control. At least all things except for his fiery girlfriend. When Dennehy drank, it would bring about a drastic change in her behavior. She wasn't the same person, and of course, that caused many, many arguments. In 1999, the couple settled in Cambridgeshire, and things were looking up. At the age of 17, Dennehy was pregnant with her first child, and she stopped drinking. John enjoyed this time and saw a nicer side of Dennehy. But once their daughter was born, Dennehy didn't want to have anything to do with her. Alcohol binges became a regular thing again, and she wasn't involved with her own baby in any way, any shape, or any form. When the baby was 2 years old, they rented a council home, which, by the way, a council home, if you're not from England and you're listening to this podcast and you don't know what a council home is, it is a British public housing. Neither of them worked, and Dennehy spent her benefit money on, of course, alcohol and drugs. John was furious, of course, and tried his best to keep the family together. But there was no motherly kindness or care coming from Dennehy at all. A neighbor remembers that Dennehy was forever drunk and on drugs, even when she was out walking with her daughter. On one occasion, she shaved the little girl's head until she was completely bald. She told the neighbor that it was because she had nits, but nobody was convinced that that was true. Another neighbor said she saw an argument in their back garden, and it ended with Dennehy picking up a cricket bat and beating John with it as he desperately tried to shield himself. When John found out about Dennehy's affair with a neighbor who was also an addict, he took their daughter and moved away to King's Lynn in Norfolk. But Dennehy tracked him down and promised to rein in the drinking, so of course, John took her back. For a short while, things were okay. Dennehy even found a job. She was working as a day laborer on vegetable farms in the area, so she would pick vegetables for the farmers markets. But her drinking started to escalate again. She stopped working for cash and started agreeing to be paid in whiskey and vodka. So when she came home from work, of course, she would be drunk and very aggressive. She even once almost pushed her 3-year-old daughter down the stairs in a drunken rage. When Dennehy didn't come home after work one night, John was quietly relieved. She disappeared for 1.5 years, and John was left to raise his daughter alone. And I can only imagine how peaceful that must have been for both of them. During this time, he had absolutely no contact with Dennehy, but he had heard rumors that she was working as a sex worker to bankroll her addictions. When she returned, she told John that she had spent time in prison and in a psychiatric unit. He hoped that this time things would be different and decided to give her yet another chance. They moved to Wisbech in Cambridgeshire in 2003. Dennehy managed to keep her drinking under control for the next 3 years. It was during this time that the couple's second daughter was born. After the birth, you already know, the old pattern repeated itself, of course, and Dennehy's drinking took precedence over everything else in her fucking life. She was drinking up to 2 liters of vodka a day, not counting the strong lagers she served herself for breakfast. In her drunken tirade, she would often commit self-harm by cutting herself with razor blades on her arms, neck, and stomach. By 2009, living with Joanna Dennehy was pure torture. John was scared for the kids as their mother's violent behavior increased. One night, she arrived home very, very drunk when she pulled a 6-inch dagger from inside her black knee-length boot and said that she wished she could kill someone. John kept a close eye on her. He went over to his daughters so that he could protect them. Dennehy was so drunk, she went to sit on the floor and she pegged the knife into the floor so it stayed there. The next day, when John took his eldest daughter to school, Dennehy wasn't far behind. She had a carry bag full of booze and made a huge scene at the school gates. That afternoon, John fetched his daughter from school, packed only bare essentials, and abandoned their home. He knew that he had to take his daughters away somewhere that Dennehy would never be able to find them. But Dennehy, she didn't even fucking care. She cut her losses and moved to the nearby Peterborough. Drinking was part of Dennehy's existence, and she prostituted herself to earn money to spend on alcohol and drugs. Her life was spiraling out of control. Her violent behavior only escalated. She kept getting herself into trouble with law enforcement. In 2012, she received a 12-month community service sentence for assault and for owning a dangerous dog. After that, she was imprisoned for theft for 14 weeks. When she was released from prison, she was 29 years old, and Dennehy was admitted to the hospital for mandated psychiatric treatment. There was concern regarding her history of self-harm, and she claimed to suffer from depression. She was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder and a series of psychopathic and other antisocial disorders. She did not receive any counseling or treatment, and she was fucking released soon after being diagnosed, which is totally fucked up. I don't understand why she didn't receive therapy, maybe some medications. How the fuck do they just release someone like her, without all of these things happening first? I don't know anything about like what goes on in England or their ways of doing things, when people are in psychiatric hospitals. But it is important to note that Dennehy was never diagnosed with mental illness. So this might, be why, it probably is why she was so easily released back into society. Dennehy's disorders were all conditions, and she showed no remorse for her actions. She did whatever she wanted to do and was not at all concerned about the consequences. To top it all off, she was a world-class pathological liar, and she could fool anyone. And it's this skill that she used when she first met Kevin Lee. Like I said, she told him she killed her father because he had raped her. None of this was even true. Joanna Dennehy was never raped or abused in any way when she was a child, and especially not by her father. In this time, Dennehy was often seen with her friend, who was named Gary Stretch. Standing 7 feet 3 inches tall, he was a big motherfucker. He changed his name from Gary Richards to Gary Stretch, like Stretch Armstrong or something. Do you guys remember those toys from back in maybe it was like the 80s, 70s or 80s? I remember one of my neighbors had one of those Stretch Armstrong dolls. They were pretty cool, actually. But anyways, the 47-year-old blamed his height as the main contributing factor in him being a bad burglar. He was identified and reported after a burglary he had committed not far from his home, and he was jailed for 2 years. He's like, yeah, buddy, it's not going to be very hard to pick you up out of a lineup for sure, you know? But in jail, Stretch was accused of playing a part in killing a fellow inmate at HMP Peterborough. Inmate Brian Haynes died of heart failure after a physical attack. Stretch's part in the crime was to be the lookout, while others launched the attack. In the end, no charges were ever pressed against Stretch. Out of prison and on parole, Dennehy arranged for him to live in one of Kevin Lee's properties at Rolleston Garth. She was a master manipulator, and Stretch was her all-too-willing follower. He knew she went around with other men, but he was only too happy to have her in his life, even if it only made him her henchman. Dennehy lived with 2 other men. One was a retired Navy veteran by the name of John Chapman, and the other was a petty thief named Leslie Layton. Kevin had already handed eviction notices to both men, and Dennehy's presence inside the bedsit was supposed to intimidate them enough so that they would leave. It wasn't long before Dennehy had the 36-year-old Leslie Layton under her spell. He fell hook, line, and sinker for her charms. However, the other roommate was a different story. Dennehy could not stand John Chapman, and neighbors were aware of the fact that he was petrified of her. He called her a mad woman after she threatened to get him out of the house by any means. Friends of John's couldn't understand where the animosity towards him came from. He was an alcoholic, but known as a friendly drunk. He liked to drink and then talk about his time in the Navy. Other than that, he minded his own damn business, and no one had anything bad to say about him. The bedsit Stretch was living in was in the process of being cleaned up and painted, a job Kevin would pay him and Dennehy to do. Dennehy floated between properties, and where she slept probably depended on how much she had to drink or who she was fucking. In this time, she met a 31-year-old Polish migrant named Lucas Slabziewski, and I'm not sure if I butchered that name or not, feeling like I may have, and I apologize if I did, but that's the best I could do. Lucas had left his hometown of Nowa Sól in the west of Poland in 2005. He then moved to Peterborough and worked in a DHL warehouse. He was a known drug user and did not have a regular address. Police believe that he met Dennehy in the environment of soup kitchens and homeless shelters. He quickly became infatuated with Dennehy and began sending her text messages. He was under the impression that the feeling was mutual. He told his friends that he had found his quote-unquote English girlfriend. One day, Lucas was caught on CCTV camera withdrawing money before going to Kevin Lee's apartment to meet Dennehy. She had lured him there with the promise of sex, but he was never seen alive again. He was blindfolded and then stabbed in the chest inside the home. Forensic evidence showed that he was probably Dennehy's very first victim, and his attack had started in the kitchen. Blood evidence in the living room showed evidence of a prolonged and vicious attack with a deep stab wound into his heart. The attack happened while Gary Stretch was upstairs sleeping. When he came downstairs and saw Lucas's body, Dennehy instructed him to help her dispose of the body. They placed Lucas's body in a green wheelie bin on the property, and Stretch later confessed that he did not alert law enforcement because he was afraid that police would arrest him for the murder. Dennehy was so proud of her accomplishment. She had finally committed her first murder. She was so callous that she took a 14-year-old girl out to that bin and showed her Lucas's decaying body. Then she informed Kevin that a man had died at one of his properties and that she needed money for a car so that she could dispose of it. Whether she admitted to Kevin that she had murdered the man or not has remained between Dennehy and Kevin. But either way, Kevin gave her the money for a car. 2 days after Lucas's murder, Dennehy and Stretch went out and bought a vehicle together, since Stretch was the only one who had a driver's license. But Stretch did insist that the car had to be registered in Dennehy's name. Without her knowledge, he insured the car, which he referred to as the hearse, in the company name, which is disgusting. Listen to this: Undertaker and Company. This was a sick joke considering why they had purchased the car in the first place. So they just thought the whole thing was fucking funny. Couple of assholes, you know? On the day they bought the car, CCTV cameras recorded them driving around late at night. Lucas's body was in the trunk, and they were looking for a good spot to dump it. Eventually, they decided on Thorny Dyke, which was close to where Stretch had lived years previous. It was a remote area with few, if any, pedestrians around. So, chances of the body being discovered were very slim. 10 days later, Dennehy had the taste for blood again, and she decided to kick off her Easter weekend with the murder of John Chapman. On Good Friday, Dennehy received an Easter card from Kevin, and later that day, she called him and arranged to meet him at his property in Rolleston Garth, that same property where she had killed Lucas. Before Kevin went to meet her, he spoke with a friend of his. Kevin told that friend that Dennehy told him that she wanted to dress him up and rape him. And I'm not kink shaming or anything, but it is really strange to just come out and tell a friend that, right? I mean, I wouldn't if I was doing something kinky like that. I'm not really sure that I would just be telling one of my friends about it, unless maybe that friend was into that kinky stuff too. I don't know, but I just thought that was kind of odd personally. But anyway, against his better judgment, Kevin decided to go. He stopped at the music store around 2 p.m. and he bought a gift for Dennehy on the way. That was the last time Kevin Lee was ever seen alive. One can only speculate as to what exactly happened when Kevin arrived at his property. He most likely willingly changed into the sequin dress given to him by Dennehy, complying to her sexual foreplay demands. But this tryst did not end the way Kevin would have ever begun to imagine. Dennehy's attack on him was sudden and unexpected. She pounced. She stabbed him 5 times in the chest, and the wounds penetrated both of his lungs as well as his heart. It was the Friday evening of Easter weekend, and Dennehy had killed 2 men so far. Now, I didn't get into the details of that, but the body of John Chapman was still at the bedsit he had shared with Dennehy and Leslie Layton. The body of Kevin was at the property he owned at Rollinston Garth. She needed to dispose of both bodies, and fortunately for her, she could count on Gary Stretch and Leslie Layton to help her out. Layton, who claimed he was operating under duress, was given the keys to Kevin's Ford Mondeo and drove to a pre-selected location. He was followed by Dennehy and Stretch. In CCTV footage, it shows Kevin's blue Mondeo pull up at a Shell service station just before 9 p.m. Layton jumped out and he filled a container with fuel. The tall and very recognizable Gary Stretch went inside and he paid for the gasoline, while Dennehy remained inside the car, and she was never even seen in that footage. From there, it's fair to assume that the threesome drove to Yaxley, where they doused Kevin's Mondeo in fuel and they set it on fire. Passerbys reported a burning car to the police shortly after 9 p.m. It's not clear which car Kevin's body was in at this point, presumably in the trunk of his own car, before Dennehy, Stretch, and Layton started the fire. Kevin's autopsy revealed that he had been covered with a fuel or accelerant, but he was never burnt. Perhaps a change of plans or difference in opinion caused them to move him into Dennehy's car. Kevin's body was dumped about 10 miles from where his burnt out car was located, in Newborough. Dennehy and Stretch dumped Kevin's body in a ditch, and in an effort to disrespect Kevin even more, they posed his body face down with his bare lower body exposed, and he was still wearing that black sequined dress. After that, the threesome returned to the bedsit in Orton Goldhay, collected the body of John Chapman, carried him down the stairs from the top floor, and loaded him into the trunk of Dennehy's car. They drove the 12 miles to Thorny Dyke and left where they left Lucas's body, and they dumped John Chapman's body next to Lucas. Leslie Layton went to sleep at the apartment where Kevin was murdered earlier that day, and Dennehy went to another friend's house so that she could sleep. This friend was named Robert Moore. When Kevin Lee, the father of 2, did not come home for dinner that Good Friday, his wife Christina immediately sensed that he was in trouble. They had been married for 17 years, and no one knew him better than his wife did. Kevin was a creature of habit. Every night he would come home, he would have his dinner, and then he would watch television with his wife and his kids. But on that Friday night, Kevin didn't show up, and when Christina tried to call him, his phone was turned off. His phone was never off. This was highly unusual since Kevin was the owner and landlord of all of these different properties, and of course this meant that he was pretty much on call 24/7, 365 in case one of his tenants needed him. Frantic to find her husband, Christina Lee asked Kevin's business partner to help her by supplying a list of addresses to all of the properties that Kevin was renting out. Then she physically went around. She's a badass, I swear. She physically went around and knocked on every single door looking for her husband, but nobody had seen him. And friends, before I continue with the story, I want to share a trailer from one of my favorite new podcasts. It's called Malice and Mocktails. I love this podcast, so let me share it. And when you get time to give it a listen, please do. I guarantee that you will love it too.
Hey friends, this is Katie, host of the true crime podcast Malice and Mocktails. Join me every Monday as I dive deeper into both vintage and contemporary true crime cases from across the globe. And because true crime can be a bit of a bummer, I also share at the end of each episode delicious mocktail and other alcohol-free beverage recipes. Thanks so much for listening. Cheers.
Christina knew that something tragic had happened to Kevin. It was completely out of character for him to ever skip a family dinner, especially at Easter, without letting her know first. At 10:40 p.m., she went to police and she reported him missing. What she didn't know at this time is that Kevin's burnt out light blue Ford Mondeo had been found on a farm road in nearby Yaxley about 2 hours before. Fire crews had arrived within minutes to extinguish the fire. They knew that this had been no accident and that the fire had been lit deliberately. The damage was extensive and ruined the entire car. In searching the car and the surrounding area, there wasn't any sign of a body, though. Together with police, Christina went around to Kevin's properties yet again. She noticed that one of the bedsits she had been to earlier now had lights on inside. Earlier, the lights were all turned off. She gave police permission to enter the property, and once they were inside, the strong smell of bleach was undeniable. Apart from blood evidence on the floor and the sofa, there were no signs of a struggle or violence. Police taped off the area and treated it as a crime scene. For the moment, though, there was not much else police could really do. Without any trace of Kevin at the car wreck, there was still the very slight chance that he could still be alive. Christina went home, waiting anxiously for more news, until the morning when she would go out and look for Kevin again. On Saturday morning, March 30th of 2013, Kevin Lee's body was found. It was found in a ditch off the motorway at Newborough by a man who was walking his dog. Terry Palmer, who was the 68-year-old man that found Kevin's body, said, quote, "I never would have found it if it weren't for my dog. You couldn't see the body from the road. At first I thought it was a dummy. It was lying face down in the dike. But then I noticed there was blood on the man's sleeves and I decided to call police straight away. The location is very isolated. Only dog walkers like myself ever come up here." Unquote. It was very hard for police to find witnesses or monitor which vehicles were passing by this area. Kevin was left in the middle of a field next to a motorway. There were no CCTVs or buildings nearby. The discovery of Kevin's body sparked an investigation, and detectives launched what they called Operation Darcy. Armed with information about Dennehy was provided by newly widowed Christina Lee. So the police followed up on this woman who had reportedly said that she had killed before and she wanted to kill again. When the police searched Dennehy's shared residence, none of the tenants were home. Police were looking for any clues that she could help them solve the puzzling murder of Kevin Lee. At the property in Orton Goldhay, police found a blood-stained mattress in the backyard. There was absolutely no attempt to hide this bloodied mattress. It was just left in plain sight. Blood tests revealed that the blood on the mattress, however, was not a match to Kevin's blood. It was time to find the tenants of this quick-let property. Joanna Dennehy shared the Orton Goldhay bedsit with two men, retired war veteran John Chapman and 36-year-old burglar Leslie Layton. There was no sign of John, but police caught up with Leslie Layton and found a photograph of a dead John Chapman in his bed on Layton's phone. Leslie Layton had some explaining to do. He had quite the rap sheet already: burglaries, criminal damage, driving offenses, as well as car theft, and these all spanned 20 years. Police were wondering if he had escalated his behavior to murder. Layton made a statement to police in which he told him what happened to his flatmate John Chapman. When Layton came out of the bathroom on the morning of March 29th, he bumped into Dennehy. Dennehy told him that she had stabbed John Chapman. And when he saw John's bloodied body in his bed, he thought that he would be next, and he said he literally feared for his own life. Still on a high after Kevin's murder, Dennehy called up a friend, and she's just fucking disgusting. But she called up a friend and sang the well-known Britney Spears song, "Oops, I Did It Again." When she saw the news report of Kevin's death on television, she danced a little jig of delight. She was reveling in her infamy. She had wanted to kill someone for a long time, and she was so happy that she finally did it. By the 1st of April, Leslie Layton was in police custody, and all he could do was confirm that Dennehy was the one that had committed the murders and that they were currently in her car, which she had bought with money Kevin Lee had given her, and they were headed south. On Saturday night, March 30th, Dennehy and Stretch knocked on the door of Robert Moore. They were lying low in Peterborough, still in plain sight. By the time police snuffed out Moore, the pair had already left, and Moore lied to the police about their whereabouts. He also managed to reach out to them and tip them off about the impending murder investigation. Police appealed to the public for help in finding Dennehy and Stretch. From descriptions provided, Dennehy and Stretch would be so easy to spot, right? Dennehy had a tattoo of a fucking star on her ugly fucking face. I'm gonna post some pictures of this bitch. She's hideous, disgusting, and it makes her more disgusting because of the things that she did. But okay, it's a fucking star tattoo on her motherfucking face. Anyway, and we all know that Stretch, with his unusual height, is going to stand out in a crowd for sure. A police officer in Norfolk informed investigators that he was called to a service station where a woman who fit Dennehy's description had been seen shoplifting. He was also able to provide a vehicle license plate which had been caught on CCTV. With this evidence, police followed them as they were on the run with the help of motorway cameras. They saw the petty crimes of them stealing food and drinks pretty much as it unfolded, but they were always 2 steps ahead of police. When Dennehy and Stretch passed through Kington, they looked up an old prison acquaintance of Stretch's, a petty thief by the name of Mark Lloyd. They were hoping he could help them sell some of their stolen goods. Dennehy had a knife with her, and she said that she had recently killed 2 men, and she felt like killing some more. Mark realized that this was no joke, and his mind was working overtime to fucking get himself out of this situation. Could you even imagine? But he wouldn't dare, as he could see Dennehy was highly agitated and she was super serious about inflicting harm with her knife. In his observation, Dennehy had complete control over Gary Stretch. He did whatever she asked. He followed her instructions out of his own free will. She never had to threaten Stretch. He was always a willing participant. During their trip, the pair of them stole a camera and proceeded to take sightseeing photos and many photos of themselves in ridiculous poses. There's one of Dennehy on the front balcony of an apartment building. Her top was lifted to expose her red bra. Her scarred stomach tells the history and the story of years and years and years of self-harm. The next photo is of Gary Stretch in the same spot, mimicking her pose. His shirt was lifted, but his leg was kicked up against the wall. It certainly does not look at all like two fugitives that were on the run after killing 3 men and disposing of their bodies. Dennehy wanted to make her way to Hereford, which was a 45-minute drive from Kington. That way they could sell their stolen goods. She forced Mark Lloyd to go with them, holding him captive with the knife she had used to kill Kevin Lee. It was a long drive. Dennehy was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle while erratically telling Stretch to stop so that they could take some happy photos of their road trip. She made Mark drink half the bottle of whiskey, and then she commanded Stretch to stop at a service station so that they could buy some cigarettes. Their whole visit to the store was, of course, caught on CCTV cameras. It appears as though Dennehy is hugging Mark in the video, but in fact, she was literally brushing up closely behind him so that she could push his knife against him through her pocket. Mark remembers that Dennehy ran her hand down his back, and he explained it like it was like being touched by a rattlesnake. Fortunately, the stop ends without incident. Thank God they didn't hurt anybody else there, and they drove off. At this point, Dennehy is actively prowling, asking both Mark and Stretch to help her find the next victim. She made it clear that the victim had to be male because she didn't want to kill women, especially women with children. Her goal was to actually kill 9 men in total, because that is how many people she thought Bonnie and Clyde had killed before they were gunned down in 1934. If she wasn't a complete dumbass bitch, though, she would have known that Bonnie and Clyde's total tally of murders added up to the number 13. But of course, no one would have dared argue facts with her at this point. Nobody's going to say, oh no, actually Bonnie and Clyde killed 13 people, not 9. Dennehy was on a mission to kill 9 people. She was chasing notoriety to become Britain's own body, and she wanted Stretch, or whoever was willing to come along with her, to be her Clyde. Dennehy was out of fucking control. She was fueled by the whiskey and the adrenaline. Mark Lloyd remembers her saying to Stretch as they were driving to Hereford, "I want my fun. I need you to get my fun." Stretch pointed out a man who was walking his dog. Mark, at this point, who was, of course, fearing for his life, witnessed Dennehy walking up to an innocent pedestrian and attack him. This man was retired Hereford firefighter Robin Bariza. He was 63 years old. Robin was very close to his home. It was broad daylight. They were in a safe area, a very public place where people took their kids to the park. It was 3:40 p.m. when that alcohol-fueled Dennehy approached Robin from behind. At first, he thought he was being punched in the back. He heard a female voice say, "I want to hurt you. I want to fucking kill you." Then she stabbed his arm, and he tried to fend her off. He kicked and punched her, but it made no difference. He was badly injured, left for dead, as Dennehy casually returned to the car. She kissed Stretch on the cheek, and then she said, "Thank you for that. Next man's got to have a dog. The next man's got to have a dog." She was so ready for more. They proceeded to drive around Hereford when Dennehy spotted 56-year-old John Rogers walking his dog on a footpath between Golden Post and the Belmont Estate. This was less than 10 fucking minutes after that brutal attack on Robin Bariza. The car pulled up close to John Rogers, and Dennehy jumped out. She casually walked up to him and said, "My boyfriend told me to do this." Then she launched her vicious attack with multiple stab wounds to his back and upper body as he was laying face down on the ground. Dennehy turned him over, ferociously stabbing him in the chest over and over again. Then she said, "Oh, look, you're bleeding. I'd better do some more." John could see the blood pooling around his body and felt his life slipping away. He begged her to stop, but Dennehy carried on matter-of-factly without showing much emotion at all. When she was finally done, she licked John's blood off the blade of the knife, grabbed his dog Archie, then jumped back into the car with the dog, ready for even more. John crawled away in a desperate effort to find help. He had been stabbed more than 30 times in total. Somehow, he found the strength to crawl the distance of 100 yards before a passerby came to his help. Thanks to quick response by emergency services, both Robin and John survived their brutal attacks. These attacks were random, and they were unprovoked, and law enforcement was on high alert to prevent any more. Robin was able to provide police with some information. Most importantly, he had noticed the stupid-ass star tattoo on Dennehy's face. Police ended up finding Dennehy only 19 minutes later after that attack on John Rogers. She was seated in her car outside a row of shops on Newton Close in an area known as the Oval. Archie, John's dog, was unharmed, thankfully, and he was reunited with John. Dennehy was calm during her arrest and handed over her knife without any sort of struggle. Stretch and Lloyd weren't with her at the time of the arrest. They had run off, but police caught up with both men and arrested them within the hour. When they cuffed Stretch, he said to the officers, "I suppose I am Britain's most wanted?" Fucking loser. Dennehy arrived at the police station joking and laughing. She showed absolutely no respect or any apprehension of the situation she was in. Less than an hour after her vicious attack on John Rogers, she was flirtatiously commenting on an officer's distinctive eyebrows. She seemed to be enjoying the fact that all of the attention was on her. When she was told that she was being booked for murder and attempted murder, she jokingly said, "Could be worse. I could be big, fat, black, and ugly." To which an officer replied, "I'm not sure how that would be worse, though." Dennehy listened with amusement, and then she said, "Yeah, it would." Ugh. Police knew had Joanna Dennehy not been caught, she would have most definitely killed again. She would have not stopped until she had reached that ideal number of 9 victims. And who knows if this bloodthirsty woman would have even stopped then. Her parents were informed about this situation. Can you even fucking imagine? For the first time in 10 years, they finally knew where their fucking daughter even was. But of course, that's not the call that any parent ever wants to receive. I feel bad for them. Her parents were devastated, of course, to hear what Dennehy had done. They could not understand how their once kind, loving daughter could now be so dismissive and cruel and heartless about her horrendous crimes. She clearly wanted the notoriety, and they knew it. When Dennehy was locked up, the public was safe again. But the full extent of her murderous rampage was about to unfold. On April 3rd, a day after Dennehy's arrest, 2 bodies were found by a farmer in ditches near Thorny Dyke, which was 10 miles from Peterborough. Police suspected one of the bodies would be John Chapman, that missing Navy veteran who shared Dennehy's Quicklet flat. And of course, that second victim was Lucas Slabzewski. At first, the deaths were classified as unexplained, but it did not take police long, of course, to link the murders to Joanna Dennehy and her henchmen. Lucas had been in the prime of his life, and his family was understandably shocked when they learned about his death. His sister Magda, I'm not sure how you say that, is it Magda maybe, issued a statement. Lucas was the joker in the family, always finding something to laugh about. His mom and dad are devastated by their loss, and he also leaves 2 grieving sisters. Retired naval officer John Chapman's death was equally upsetting to his loved ones. At the door of the bedsit where he lived and died, friends and neighbors paid tribute to him by lighting candles and spraying cider. On the boarded up door, graffiti read, "R.I.P. John," and "Justice will be done." John's family released a statement that said, "We are all so upset and shocked by the tragic loss of John. He was a loving brother, brother-in-law, and uncle. He was much loved by all who knew him and will be missed by all of his friends and family." Kevin's family was broken after the destructive Dennehy unleashed a dark side to Kevin, leading him astray in the months leading up to his death. They had to remember him for who he was before he had met her. Kevin had been Christina's first and her only love. He had been a devoted father to his daughter, Sierra, as well as his son, Dino. In the statement about losing Kevin, his family said, "We are devastated by Kevin's death. He was a wonderful husband, father, loving brother, and son. His naturally infectious personality touched everyone who knew him." It was time for retribution. Dennehy and her crew of co-conspirators were behind bars, and law enforcement were building an airtight case against them. With cell phone records showing communication between Dennehy, Stretch, Layton, and Moore on the night of Kevin and John Chapman's murders, the circumstantial evidence was indeed piling up. Police recovered blood spatter evidence from Kevin's Quicklet apartment in Rollinston Garth. Traces of Lucas's blood was found in the kitchen and all the way to the front door. The blood on a blood-stained sofa matched Kevin's blood. Both victims' blood dripped on the carpet and showed that their bodies were moved. Attempts were made to clean up the scene with bleach, but it wasn't a very good job. Footwear impressions that belonged to both Dennehy and Stretch had also been found at the scene. That blood-stained mattress found at the property in Orton Goldhay, that was John Chapman's mattress. He was killed in his bed as he was passed out drunk. Clotted blood showed that he had been lying there for quite some time, probably the entire Good Friday, while Dennehy was out executing her murder of Kevin Lee. After his death, Dennehy took John Chapman's cell phone to keep in touch with Stretch, Layton, and Moore. When Stretch was arrested, there was blood on his shoes, which belonged to Lucas. Shoes found at Stretch's home had blood matching to Kevin Lee. Inside Dennehy's car, police found Kevin Lee's blood and the Easter card that he had given Dennehy. Dennehy's knife was soaked with blood, which matched John Rogers, who had been her last victim, the guy walking the dog in Hereford. When she was on remand, awaiting her trial, prison officials found evidence of a planned escape written inside her diary. The plan was to kill a guard and cut off their fucking finger so that she could fool the biometric system inside the prison. Apparently, she was going to use that fingerprint on the finger, to open up, the gate or whatever so she could fucking escape. But this plot earned her solitary confinement from September 2013, right before she stood trial, until September 2015, which was 7 months after her sentencing. So for 2 fucking years, she was in solitary confinement. She claims that isolation had a dire effect on her and it had caused her to self-harm and that her human rights had been violated. But fuck her. It was later ruled that she had been punished in accordance with the law, the nature of her offenses, and the risk she posed to the public if she were to escape were fucking massive. Yeah, so fuck you, Dennehy. Ugh. Anyways, Dennehy was indicted at the Old Bailey in London. She was charged for the murders of Lucas, John, Kevin, as well as the attempted murders of Robin Bariza and John Rogers. Dennehy shocked police, prosecutors, as well as her own legal team by pleading guilty to all the charges. Throughout the court procedure, she showed no signs of remorse, and she literally laughed. Her legal team had the opportunity to double check with her to confirm if she indeed meant what she had said, and she said yes. She loved to kill, and she wasn't ashamed to admit it. When asked what he would like to say to Dennehy, the survivor, John Rogers, simply asked, "Why? Why did you do it?" There is no logical answer to that question, though. Joanna Dennehy is undoubtedly a very disturbed person. After years of drug and alcohol abuse coupled with a sociopathic personality, it made for a fatal combination. Her lust for violence and her lust for blood made her a very unique kind of female killer. And unlike most female serial killers who follow a dominant male, she was actually the dominant one. She didn't need any help in committing the crimes, only in cleaning up the crime scenes. So men like Gary Stretch, Leslie Layton, and Robert Moore were easy to manipulate, and she used them because she could. Dennehy chose to kill with a knife, which was a method that is violent and messy. And by using a knife, she received more satisfaction in the act of killing than she would have, let's just say she had poisoned her victims. That would not have been as satisfying. In a police interview, she actually referred to murder as being Moorish, and that after the first killing, she quote-unquote got a taste for it. On February 28th of 2014, Joanna Dennehy was given a life sentence. She muttered and smirked as her sentence was passed down. She laughed when she heard that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Her mother feels that the world is a safer place with Dennehy locked away for life because she has no remorse. She was given a whole life sentence, making her the third woman in British history to ever receive this custodial sentence, after Myra Hindley and Rosemary West. And, I had done episodes previously to Rosemary West, Rose and Fred West. So if you haven't listened to those yet, go back. I had to break it into 3 episodes because it was so lengthy. But incidentally, Dennehy was taken to the same facility where Rose West was incarcerated. West had received her whole life sentence after bodies of several women were found at her home, at the home that she shared with her husband Fred. She had been convicted of the murder of 10 women, mostly committed in the 1970s. But within 20 minutes of her arrival at Her Majesty's Prison, Bronzefield, an attempt to be the new alpha female, Joanna Dennehy fucking threatened to kill Rose West. West was kept in solitary confinement for her own protection and subsequently moved to another prison more than a 5-hour drive north from where Dennehy was in Surrey. Wouldn't it have been great, like, if they would have just let them fight it out and maybe they just kill each other and the end? Anyway, Stretch and Layton pled not guilty and claimed they were manipulated by Dennehy. They may have been, okay, this is my little insert. They may have been manipulated, but they were still fucking dumbasses, and, they were still fucking guilty, in my opinion. It's so stupid. Like, some 7'3" guy is going to sit there and whine like a baby and say that, he was manipulated by some woman. But anyway, Stretch was found guilty of 3 counts of preventing the lawful and decent burial of a body and as well as 2 further counts of the attempted murder of Robin Bariza and John Rogers. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 19 years to be served. Leslie Layton received a sentence of 14 years for disposing of the bodies in Peterborough and for perverting the course of justice. Which perverting the course of justice or preventing the course of justice, it's all the same to me, but whatever. I read the word wrong. Anyways, Robert Moore was found guilty of assisting an offender, and he only received 3 years behind bars. No charges were ever brought against Mark Lloyd, who was in the car on the day of Dennehy's attacks in Herefordshire. He is still traumatized by the events he witnessed that day, but he literally feels fortunate to be alive. Trial judge Mr. Justice Spencer recommended that Joanna Dennehy should never be released. He also said that she was sadomasochistic and lacked the normal range of human emotions, and he's not wrong. She proved the judge right, and as she was fucking led from the court, she said this to everyone in the courtroom: "I want you to know I am sorry for the attempted murders. I am not sorry for the murders." Fucking bitch. According to a fellow inmate at HMP Bronzefield in Surrey, Dennehy loved the fact that everyone knew who she was and what she had done. The inmate reportedly said, "Dennehy didn't like it when people said she killed 3. She liked to boast that she killed 5 and did not like it when people said she had failed." That explains Dennehy's comment about being sorry about the attempted murders. The sorry wasn't remorse, but rather regret that she didn't actually succeed in killing Robin Bariza and John Rogers as well. The father of Dennehy's children, John Traynor, has remarried and lives in the heart of England in Derbyshire with his new wife and their 2 daughters. Like Joanna Dennehy's surviving victims and the loved ones of those she killed, John and his daughters battle every single day, to forget the woman who has destroyed their family. Daughter Cheyenne Traynor said in interviews that she had considered taking her own life when she was told about the slaughters. She was just 13 years old at the time. She said that she lost all of her senses and just fell to the floor crying. And the first thing she said was, "Will I turn into her? Will that be me?" Cheyenne now lives in Manchester and has completed a course in travel and tourism. She has added, I will never turn out like my mom. I'm my own person. I might have some A personality traits of her, but we're two different people. I was not around her for many years. She hasn't had that massive influence on me. Cheyenne then added, I can't believe she did what she did. It makes me want to cry. She's hurt those people, and I can't ever forgive her for that. She should spend the rest of her life in jail thinking about the misery she's caused. In a way, she's completely ruined my life. I have this family name associated with the fact she's taken lives. When Myra Hindley was arrested, they never found where the bodies were because she never gave anything up. In a way, because my mom hasn't said anything or given any explanation, those families will never understand. And I can't get my head around it. I think she should explain why she did what she did. Those families deserve peace of mind in their lives. They are in the dark, like me. They should have a reason why. I really feel for her and the whole family. I do know that Cheyenne did write her mom a letter at one point, not expecting to hear anything back. But Dennehy did write her back and tell her how much she loved her. And it was a very positive letter. So Cheyenne actually went to the prison to visit her. I'm not sure if she still does. I'm not sure if they have an ongoing relationship, but I do know that fucking Dennehy is a see you next Tuesday type of bitch, and she's still in the news. And as of last July of 2021, so she had been in this relationship or infatuated with some prison guard there. And the prison guard was actually being investigated for something else, for sexual assault on somebody else. So police went to his home with a warrant and searched his home and found love letters to him from Dennehy. So Dennehy got moved to a different prison in a different location, hours away. So I guess Dennehy was really pissed off about it. But fuck her. She doesn't get to hook up with men and manipulate men and fuck men and have any kind of enjoyable experience whatsoever. I mean, it's just crazy. And as much as, she killed more than 3 people, so she is considered a serial killer, in my mind, I consider her more of a spree killer because she did everything pretty much in a short span of time. So, I need to end this because it's going on and on and on, and it was a long story. I hope that you guys all enjoyed it. And if you did, that would be great if you shared it with a friend. Share it to your Instagram or Facebook story. Tag some friends on my Instagram when I post about this. I might throw out some gifts for y'all if I see anybody tagging their friends or sharing this to their stories and tagging me in their stories, because I really, really love doing this. At this point, it's just a hobby. I would love, of course, to do it full time one day, but just keep sharing it so we get more listeners. If you don't mind, if you're enjoying this podcast, go rate it 5 stars. Go leave me an Apple Podcast review. And most importantly, please keep these people, all of these survivors, all of these family members in your prayers, in your thoughts, in your prayers. All good, happy, positive vibes, because I can't imagine what it's like to have this piece of shit as part of your family, or being a surviving family member of one of the people that she murdered. I mean, you can't imagine it unless you're in that position. So when I do these podcast episodes, whenever I record this, I try as much as I can to be respectful and to honor these people. Like, all these people died. These 3 people died because she's a fucking bitch. And she didn't care about anybody else but herself. And I know that she hasn't been clinically diagnosed with any mental illnesses. I don't want to shame her for being a drunk and a drug abuser. When you're an addict, I know, like, sometimes, when you're addicted to something, you just can't help it. But this is beyond forgiveness. I can't understand this behavior at all. She took some lives, and she ruined so many more lives than she took. So until next time, guys, I love you all. Keep talking crime.